piercing shriek of a smartphone alarm at 4:45 a.m., the violent hiss of tap water hitting cheap instant coffee, the cold blue reflection in the driver's side window as a man grips the steering wheel in the dark, trying to convince himself that the acid burning in his stomach is just ambition. It isn't ambition. It's the sound of a system chewing on his ulcers. Let's call him Arthur. Arthur is a mid-level director of operations. He is the first car in the parking lot before the sun breaches the horizon, and he is the last one to turn off the fluorescent lights when the cleaning crew arrives. He wears his dark circles like military medals. He brags about his 60-hour work weeks at family dinners. He actually believes his chronic fatigue is a down payment on a wealthy future. This is the most dangerous, widely accepted hallucination of the modern era. The colossal lie that the correlation between physical effort and financial wealth is a straight line. We have been engineered to worship at the altar of the hustle. We are conditioned from kindergarten to believe that chronic exhaustion is the universal currency for success. You sweat, you bleed, you grind, and eventually the universe rewards you with financial freedom. But the universe doesn't run the payroll department. And the math tells a much darker story. Hard work, devoid of financial leverage and equity, is not a path to wealth. It is a brutal, hyper-efficient mechanism for wealth transfer. Your sweat does not build your kingdom. Your sweat simply lubricates the dividend machine of the people who actually own the assets. Physical exhaustion is the ultimate corporate sedative. They don't overwork you just to extract more productivity. They overwork you so you never have the cognitive bandwidth left at the end of the day to read the financial blueprints of your own cage. A tired mind cannot plan an escape. A tired mind just wants to order a $30 takeout meal, collapse on a finance sofa, and numb itself with streaming algorithms until the alarm screams again. Arthur thinks he's climbing a ladder. He doesn't realize the ladder is just a hamster wheel painted gold. He trades his finite, unrecoverable life force for a fixed, heavily taxed salary and a 3% annual raise that gets immediately swallowed by the rising cost of groceries and property taxes. He is the perfect premium consumer. He makes just enough money to qualify for massive debt, but he is too busy working to ever actually enjoy the things he bought. Society romantically glorifies the tireless worker because the pyramid needs a massive, stable, unthinking base to support the apex. They give you a fancy title, a sliver of artificial authority, and a plastic Employee of the Month plaque as the bait, and you swallow it, hook, line, and sinker. You sacrifice your health, your relationships, and your youth, blindly trusting that the machine will eventually hand you a golden ticket. It won't. The structure is mathematically designed to consume your peak earning years and spit you out when your back starts to fail. But here is the crack in the matrix, the glitch they desperately try to hide from the middle class. Why is the man who volunteers for unpaid overtime every single day, mathematically and psychologically, further away from true freedom than the guy spending his Tuesday afternoon staring at a ceiling fan? The answer is an invisible architecture that dictates who stays poor and who buys back their time. And once you see the trap they set for your energy, you can never unsee it. The physical toll of the modern workday is not a side effect of the economy. It is the core strategy. We are bombarded with narratives praising the relentless grind. The billionaire podcasts tell you to wake up at 4 a.m., take a cold shower, and crush your competition. But they conveniently leave out the fact that they own the board on which the game is played. You are just a piece moving across their squares. The corporate structure doesn't reward hard work with wealth. It rewards hard work with more work. The moment you prove you can handle an impossible load, that impossible load becomes your new baseline expectation, and that leads to the first invisible barrier. Rule 1, the false virtue of exhaustion. Let's dissect the biology of the trap. The traditional career path is an energy harvesting environment. It is meticulously designed to drain your cognitive bandwidth. When our guy Arthur pulls his car into the driveway at 7:30 p.m., his prefrontal cortex is entirely compromised. The mental energy required to analyze a financial statement, read a book on asset allocation, or simply map out a 10-year survival strategy is completely gone. A society that romanticizes sleep deprivation is a society that desperately relies on an unthinking workforce to sustain its profit margins. That is how the machine secures your obedience. They do not just lock you in the maze. They guarantee you are too drained to look up at the walls, because a well-rested worker is a dangerous liability. A well-rested worker has the clarity to realize the math doesn't add up. An exhausted worker doesn't rebel. An exhausted worker just wants comfort. And here is where the trap snaps shut. Your physical fatigue directly fuels the consumer economy. You trade 8, 10, 12 hours of your life for a paycheck, and then you bleed that money out through the convenience tax. You order the $40 takeout on a delivery app because boiling a pot of pasta feels like climbing a mountain. You buy the expensive espresso every morning because you need a chemical stimulant just to survive the morning commute. You book the overpriced resort vacation on a high-interest credit card because you are desperate to escape your reality for 7 miserable days a year. You aren't buying luxury. You are buying temporary anesthesia to numb the pain of your own routine. The antagonist here is the middle management culture that weaponizes your ambition. The corporate structure that calls the company a family right before asking you to work the weekend for free. They compensate you with a cheap pizza party and a fake sense of urgency. They give you a title upgrade. Senior executive, which is nothing but a heavier, gold-plated collar. It comes with 0 equity, 0 leverage, and 100 extra emails you have to answer from your bed. You fall victim to the sunk cost fallacy. You have already sacrificed a decade of your health to climb this specific ladder. Stepping off now feels like an admission of defeat, so you double down. You spin the wheel faster, hoping the blur of motion will somehow magically transport you to a better life. But the wheel is bolted to the floor, and your constant running is what generates the electricity for the people watching from above. Rule 2, the cognitive death by hustle. This is retail therapy born from desperation. The system keeps your bank account just full enough to qualify for a car loan, but your spirit empty enough to actually sign the paperwork. You buy the new luxury sedan to reward yourself for all the unpaid overtime. You sit in traffic, gripping a leather steering wheel, breathing in the new car smell, trying to ignore the crushing reality that this depreciating piece of metal now requires you to stay at the job you hate for another 72 months. The machine uses your own fatigue to sell you the bait. And every time you take a bite, the cage shrinks a little more. Let's strip away the emotion. Let's strip away the corporate propaganda about paying your dues. Let's look at the bloodless, unapologetic mathematics of selling your time for money. This is where the illusion of hard work completely collapses. Let's calculate the ceiling. If your primary source of wealth generation requires your physical presence, your wealth has a biological limit. You only have 24 hours in a day. You have to sleep for 8, commute for 2, and work for 10. That leaves you with 4 hours of depleted cognitive function. If you double your effort, if you grind twice as hard, You cannot double your hours. The math breaks. You hit the wall of human endurance. And the machine knows this. It anticipates your ambition and neutralizes it through the tax code. Here is the fundamental divide between the working class and the wealthy. The working class is taxed on their sweat. The wealthy are taxed on their capital. When Arthur works 10 hours of overtime, he is severely punished for his ambition. He gets pushed into a higher marginal tax bracket. The federal government takes a larger bite. The state takes a larger bite. The invisible inflation tax quietly drains whatever is left. He works 20% harder to take home 10% more paper money, which buys 5% less at the grocery store than it did 12 months ago. That is a rigged equation. You cannot outwork a system where the rules of arithmetic change the moment you get a raise. Working harder in a broken equation just means you arrive at bankruptcy exhausted. Rule 3. The mathematics of a fixed ceiling. This brings us back to the question we asked at the beginning. Why is the man who volunteers for unpaid overtime mathematically further away from freedom than the guy spending his Tuesday afternoon staring at a wall? Because the guy staring at the wall isn't selling his time. He owns equity. He holds assets that compound regardless of his physical state. While Arthur is destroying his lower back in a swivel chair to earn a pre-tax bonus, the guy on the couch is collecting dividends, rental yields, and capital gains that are taxed at nearly half the rate of Arthur's physical labor. Arthur is trading finite, depreciating hours for linear income. The other man has decoupled his income from his biology. Society defines a respectable citizen as someone who willingly forfeits a massive percentage of their active labor to the government, while remaining utterly blind to the fact that the architects of the economy pay a fraction of that on their passive leverage. They sell you the pride of a hard day's work to distract you from the humiliation of the math. The tragedy isn't just what the environment takes from your paycheck. It is the opportunity cost of your fatigue. Every hour you spend trying to outwork a bad financial strategy is an hour you aren't acquiring leverage. While you are busy answering emails at 8 o'clock at night to protect a job that would replace you in a week, the assets you should have bought are compounding in price, moving permanently out of your reach. When you rely entirely on a paycheck, you have zero optionality. Your employer buys your time at wholesale and sells your output at retail. The difference between what you produce and what you are paid is the equity that builds your boss's generational wealth. You aren't building an empire. You are the raw material being mined to build someone else's. You finance the luxury sedan to feel like you're winning, but if you have to work 70 hours a week to make the payment on those heated leather seats, you don't own a vehicle. You are leasing a mobile isolation chamber. The debt ensures your compliance. You cannot afford to walk away from a toxic manager. Your credit card minimums and your mortgage dictate your behavior. You are entirely trapped by the shiny bait you bought to look free. The realization hits hard. You are a highly efficient, self-funding gear designed to extract your prime years. If you keep trading sweat for depreciating dollars, you will never cross the threshold. To break the cycle, you have to stop trying to run faster on a wheel that was engineered to harvest your speed. Rule 4. Leverage over sweat. You have to decouple your biological energy from your earning potential. The architects of this system do not get rich by working 90-hour weeks. They get rich by owning the infrastructure that requires you to work 90-hour weeks. Leverage is the only mathematical escape velocity. It is the transition from being the muscle to being the mind. Your physical body is a depreciating vessel. Your knees will eventually fail. Your cognitive sharpness will eventually fade. The corporate hierarchy does not care about your lower back pain or your unquestioning loyalty. It only cares about your output. If you are not aggressively buying assets, if you are not acquiring index funds, real estate equity, or digital property that generates yield while you sleep, you are bleeding out. You are trading a finite, irreplaceable resource for a melting currency. The greatest financial defense mechanism you can ever build is absolute social irrelevance. The middle class is terrified of looking poor, so they finance a heavy, exhausting facade of wealth. They lease the imported SUVs and wear the designer labels because they desperately need validation from strangers in traffic. But validation is a brutal tax on the weak. If you need a German hood ornament to convince the world you have value, you don't have value. You are just a walking, breathing billboard for the banks that own your debt. The truly free do not flex. True freedom is the ability to walk into a room, look completely unremarkable, and know you could buy the entire building if you felt like it. The exit from the rat race is profoundly boring. It doesn't look like a cinematic montage of private jets, crypto wallets, and expensive champagne. It looks like driving a 10-year-old Toyota Corolla with faded paint while quietly maxing out your brokerage accounts. It looks like a quiet Tuesday morning where your phone doesn't ring, listening to the silent hum of dividends hitting your account while society is stuck in gridlock traffic. It is the deliberate, calculated process of starving your ego to feed your net worth. You have to learn to find deep, visceral pleasure in disappointing the consumer economy. Every single dollar you refuse to spend on artificial status is another brick in the wall of your financial fortress. You have to ruthlessly kill the version of yourself that cares about climbing their ladder. Let Arthur have the corner office and the stress-induced hypertension. Let him frame his meaningless Employee of the Month certificate. You are playing a completely different game. A game played entirely in the shadows, where the only metric that matters is how many hours of your future you actually own. And mastering that game requires you to understand the final law of the maze. Rule 5. The architecture of the ghost. The financial system is a perfectly calibrated mousetrap, and the cheese is social approval. They coat the high-interest debt in the sweet smell of modern luxury, hoping you will blindly step on the spring. But the rat who survives isn't the one who runs the maze the fastest. The rat who survives is the one who looks at the premium bait, realizes the steel bars are closing in, and simply walks away into the dark. You stop playing their game. You stop financing your own captivity. You redirect every ounce of your exhausted energy away from impressing your coworkers, and you use it to buy your time back hour by hour, share by share. They want you tired. They want you compliant. They want you waking up at 4:45 a.m., staring into the bathroom mirror, entirely dependent on their paycheck to fund the life you barely have the energy to live. The door is right there. It just costs your ego to walk through it. If you made it to the end of this, drop a comment saying, "Faded Corolla." Everyone else will think you're crazy, but we'll know you're awake. My name is Daniel Rath, and I'll see you outside the maze.